Yeah, that's right. I know why you clicked on this video. You want to see the cheapest build. Well, trust me, I won't disappoint. This will be the cheapest build you will ever see. Now, let's clear up the air. This, by all means, is not going to be reliable. But something to keep in mind is there are three things: fast, cheap, and reliable. However, you can only choose two. If you want fast and reliable, you're going to have to spend some money. You can have cheap and reliable, but you won't be making as much power. Or you could do it like me and be cheap and fast but not reliable. You cannot have all three of them. That's just the game that we have to play, unfortunately, when we're working with a very tight budget. Now that we got that out the way, let's get right into the video. I really hope you guys enjoy it. This took very long to make. As always, it'll be much appreciated if you guys can like, comment, and subscribe. Anyways, let's get right into the video. Take a real good look at this, boys. We are cheaping out like crazy. I can't even believe the amount of money we are supposed to be saving, but I don't think these parts are gonna last. I mean, oh well. I will drop everything down in the description below. Last video we ended up holding out the block. We also cleaned it up really nice. It looks really good. It just needs a little bit of paint here and there. Other than that, we're just gonna get right into it. We're not gonna waste any time. We're gonna pick up parts as we go, which is why I have them all laid out on the ground. To start off, I'm going to grab the piston rings and put them in the cylinder walls, making sure that the clearances and the gap is within spec. Now every car is gonna be very different, and since I'm going turbo, these have to be very precise. So you want to just grab two ends of the piston ring and you want to just gently put it in there. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect centered yet, because we're going to use the piston to put it in there correctly. As you can see, I have all the piston rings in there. Now it's time to check the gap on them. Now, to know what gaps your piston rings need to be at, you have to do some math, which I will gladly show you how to do. Now, this is a B18B1 block. If you don't know, it's an 81 millimeter, but we had to convert that to inches, which in this case is 3.189. Now, you want to times that times 55, and you might be asking, why is it 55? And really, it all depends on your application. I'm doing mid boost. If you're doing street, all motor, or nitrous, then it would have to be times by something else. Your piston rings should come with a little sheet that tells you what to times it by. If it doesn't, I'll put up a link in the description so you can have an idea or just something to help you out. Now, the pistons I grab are for turbo applications, so the piston gaps should already be where they're supposed to be. Now, in case you have just regular standard piston rings and you need to gap them, I do not stand by this, and this is one of the worst things you could possibly do. I will recommend just buying the tool so you can gap your pistons properly. But if you don't have that type of money, then if you have a file, you can just file them down. Now, you want to be very gentle with this, and you want to take it slow. You also want to have steady hands and keep your hands straight as possible, because one screw up can be the end of you. Now, on to the cheap connecting rods. How did I do it? Well, These rods are actually from Jigs. However, Jigs has them for about I think $200. Well, I found them on some sketchy website, and they were $44. Same part number and everything. So I tried to get Jigs to price match because they do offer that, and just pause the video right there so you can read their email. They pretty much said no. So I just had to buy them from that sketchy website, which, to my belief, their website is no longer available. But in case you were wondering, these are some Chinese brand. They don't fit inside the piston. So the reason it took me so long to post this video out is because I couldn't find a good machine shop that would clearance the top of it where the wrist pin goes, since that's where it did not want to go inside the piston. However, I did meet somebody who was really old school and really cool, who basically told me, look dude, stop being a freaking wimp, just send it. He didn't say that, but it almost seemed like it, because what he told me was kind of shocking. He told me just get a file and file them down. It's literally 1/1000th of an inch. So that's exactly what I did. Now this took so freaking long. I want to say about 2 days, 2 afternoons basically, since I have to work. You need a lot of patience. You also need to buy a scale, because you are removing material off these rods, and you have to weigh them to make sure they are all the same. Other than that, if you're willing to take that risk like me, then by all means buy like 7 packs of them. Too bad they don't have them for $44. They must have really shut that business down. Now before we put the rods and the pistons together, we must clean them out due to all the metal that we removed. So I just dump them in water and soap to remove all those metal shavings. After that, you want to dry them clean and spray WD-40 so that they don't oxidize. Once that's done, we can start assembling them, and you want to use some lube, some assembly lube, which I am using Lucas. Now you want to lube up the wrist pin so that it goes into the piston and rod nice and smooth. Once you have all 4 of them done, we can start putting the oil rings on. These don't have to be gapped at all. Now we're going to take the top and bottom rings and put them on a piston. You want to do this one at a time. You don't want to mix pistons with other cylinder walls, because whatever rings came out of that cylinder have to go back into that same exact cylinder. We are not going to play this game of mix match. Also, when putting your top ring and second ring, you want to use a special tools. Here's the part number. I got this at AutoZone. It's fairly cheap. It doesn't cost anything. After all that is done, we can start moving into the fun stuff, which is putting the pistons into the cylinders. But before that, we want to just clock every piston ring differently. We want one pointing up, down, left, right. You get the idea. Or you can Google search it real quick and see what your manufacturer wants you to do. Once that's all done, you are going to need a piston compressor tool. Here's the part number. You can rent it at your local parts store, or you can buy one. You do not want to cheap out on this. You are going to need one to make your job a whole lot easier. Then you want to grab a hammer and lightly tap it in. Be very gentle. Come on, man. As you can see, I have one in. Now I got to do the other 3, but you pretty much get the point from here on. Now before we put the crank in, we're going to put our main bearings and our rod bearings, since we are right there. Also, don't forget your thrust washers, which to keep them in place you have to use assembly lube. Then we can put the crank on and check for clearances. Now to check for clearances, we are going to use plastic gauge. Now once again, every car is going to be different. It just has to be within spec. Grab your plastic gauge and put a little bead on the crank. Then we're going to put the main caps on. Now the bolts for the main caps are very long, so instead of using a ratchet, I'm just going to use an impact. But you want to be very gentle with this. You don't want to go too crazy. Sometimes we can get a little trigger happy, and that's where mistakes happen. So once again, take your time, do it slowly. We're not torquing them down with the impact, we're going to actually use a torque wrench. Once that's down, you want to have a good torque wrench because we're going to torque these down. Now, when torquing these down, you have to go in sequence and you have to take steps, which in my case, it's going to be 22 and then 56 foot-pounds. Once that's done, you have to loosen the main caps again with the breaker bar. That way you can check the clearances and making sure that it's within spec. Then you want to clean the marks that was left by the plastic gauge with brake cleaner. After that, you're going to torque them down again, this time for the very last time. And then you're going to have to repeat the same process for the rod caps. Once that's finished, now we can unwrap our head gasket, our $20 head gasket. I cannot believe those words are coming out of my mouth. However, I will be copper spraying the head gasket. Now there's a lot of debate online whether you should or whether you shouldn't. I'm just going to do it. Some say that if it has the black coating on it, you don't need it. Others say otherwise. Look, a little bit doesn't hurt. Do what you want to do. After all, this is a $20 head gasket. Let those words sink in. While that's drying, we are going to put our ARP head studs and put some ARP sauce on them. I know you like that stuff on your burger. Now, ARP recommends that you just hand tighten these. Yes, you can use the Allen key just to make sure that they are all going down nicely. You just don't want to use the ratchet. Next, we are going to put our $20 head gasket on. You want to be very careful with this. You want to wear gloves. If you don't have gloves, just make sure your hands are degreased. You definitely don't want to touch the copper, or else it was pretty pointless of you putting it on. Now, I won't lie to you, I needed some help to get the head onto the block since it was heavy. After that, we can put our ARP washers and bolts, and then you want to just hand tighten them again, because now we are going to torque them down. Now please use a 12-point socket. ARP head studs that I have take a 13mm. Definitely don't want to put a 6-point, you want to use a 12-point. Now putting these washers and bolts, I found that the easiest way to do so was to use some pliers. Because if you try to put these with your hands, they will fall into the cylinder head and you're going to have to get them out with the magnet. Now it is time to torque them down. Now once again, these have to be torqued down in a sequence and they have to be torqued down in steps, which in my case is going to be 30, 60, 80. Since I'm going to be turboing this car, you definitely don't want to use the stock bolts. You definitely want to switch over to ARP head studs. Now I usually like to wait about 15 minutes within steps, because heat is transferring through that bolt. You want to give it some time to cool off, because that's how bolts end up breaking when you're putting that much torque. Also, that applies to if you're reusing the head bolts. I don't always recommend buying ARP head studs, especially if you don't need to. A lot of people say don't reuse head bolts because they're stretch bolts and all this nonsense. Look, if they're still in good condition, then reuse them. I have reused head bolts and never had a problem. I say only get ARP if you're doing a crazy build that is not within spec. But you know, other people beg to differ, so. Now that I'm finished with that, I can put the cams on, but before we put the cams on, we want to use assembly lube on the rocker arms. Now these are just the stock GSR cams, nothing crazy, nothing special. Don't need them, don't need to waste money. These will be great for what we're looking for, which is 350 to 400 horsepower, but I'm mostly aiming for the 350. Once that's done, I have to put the cam holders on. Then torque them down, which I'm going to torque them down by field. I've heard a lot of stories of people breaking these bolts. Plus, it doesn't require that much foot-pounds anyways. Well, guys, that is it. It's pretty much finished. I'm not going to throw the valve cover on due to the fact that it's dirty and I really want to paint it. However, you guys can see that I didn't put the oil pump or the water pump or the rear main seal due to the fact that I'm going to be reusing the bolts off of my old block since I couldn't find online what was the thread size. So instead of going to Home Depot and going through all that trouble, I'm just gonna wait and reuse the bolts off of the old block. So here's what I did so far so that it doesn't get dirty. I wrapped it in a trash bag. Anyways guys, that's pretty much it. Well guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It took me a very long time, so I really hope you guys can enjoy it. I also hope you guys like the voiceover. It was not my intention to do the voiceover, but it happened because there were some times where I just wanted to just focus on the engine building. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one.